really excited today to be joined by Lacey Newman. Lacey is a survivor of the horrific shooting that occurred in Las Vegas, Nevada on October 1st, 2017. And she's going to share with us some of her experiences, some of her lessons learned, and ultimately some lessons that can really help strengthen our preparedness, what she went through, how it felt, and what she's been doing ever since. So Lacey, thank you so much for joining us today and being so willing to share what I know is just got to be one of the most horrific experiences anybody could ever go through.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, Lacey, if you could kind of talk us through that day and kind of set the stage for us. Obviously I know you were out with some friends and just went out to have a normal day at a music venue. What was kind of the scene there? How did you start really starting to get a sense that, gosh, this was something out of the normal and something was just amiss during this concert?
Sure. So it was a 3-day music festival, and this was the last night. So we were very excited. Jason Aldean was the performer, and he was our favorite at the festival that night. So we were just ready to go. And a few songs in, we hear popping noises, and we think, well, this must just be fireworks. There's pyrotechnics. Maybe we're hearing something, we're just not seeing something. And the music continued, so we continued to have a really great time. And a new song started, and as soon as that song started and he began singing, you heard kind of the automatic pops, very close in sequence pops. And that's when I think we immediately ducked. And again, we're still hoping that's fireworks somewhere off in the distance. After all, we're in Las Vegas. We're literally on the Las Vegas Strip, but we just don't see any. And you can hear the original shot fired and you can hear an echo. And so we're hearing all of these things. We're not seeing anything. And by the time the second round started, I just grabbed my one girlfriend that I was with at the time. We grabbed hands and I just said, run. And that's when we started running.
We think a lot about kind of the paralysis of, first off, just the comprehension. You never expect to be in something like this. And certainly you're at a concert, as you mentioned, in Las Vegas. It's easy to dismiss this as fireworks or a car backfiring or those kind of things. What were the folks around you? Did everyone kind of have that same sense of urgency, or were there people that were just kind of, in disbelief or just maybe not even comprehending what was going on?
I think at first people just didn't know. And maybe the music kind of drowned out some of it. And yes, there was disbelief. And I know a gentleman behind us was laughing at us and he said, "Relax, ladies, it's just fireworks." And I turned and I said, "That is not fireworks. We need to run." And, at that point, some people were already down, and the group that was kind of next to us, we actually ended up tripping and falling over them. I don't know if they had someone that was already injured or if they had just tried to start evacuating also. And in that process, everyone just kind of tripped over each other. So I think it was kind of half and half. Half the people were like, "No, it's fireworks. Don't worry about it." And then the other half of us were kind of like, "No, this is something different. We got to get out of here."
So I just appreciate how quick you were to react and be able to respond to that. Because, again, most people, it takes a while. And there's been documented delays in calling 911 and all that kind of stuff in prior shootings. We also think about, just that level of preparation. And I know I've certainly been guilty of it. When you go into a new place or a new venue, restaurant, movie theater, wherever have you, we don't always kind of take a look and see what our exit options are. So when you're in this situation now, obviously it's high stress. You understand you got to get out of there. What's going through your head when you start thinking about, gosh, where can I go that's safe, especially because you don't have any sense where this gunfire is even coming from? How do you know which direction to run and where you're ultimately trying to get to?
It's interesting in hindsight, right? Because we thought we had kind of made preparations. Like we had shared our locations on our phones, and we had, agreed that no one girl was going to go off alone. We had to go in groups of twos. And we even had a rule that no one was allowed to do shots because we did not want anyone, to be in any kind of trouble. So we had these rules and we thought that we were really preparing. But you know what, you nailed it on the head, is we actually didn't know where our exits were. We had entered and exited the venue the same place for the entire weekend. And so when this happened, we weren't anywhere near the entrance. And actually the entrance would have been back towards Las Vegas Boulevard. We would have had to go through the entire exit or the entire venue to get to the exit and entrance that we had used. So I remember thinking, I know there's bathrooms, and the bathroom stalls were, kind of metal, thin metal stalls, but at least it was somewhere to hide because we're just in this open area. So we just headed that way, and along the way just kind of followed the crowd. And by the time we got over into that area, people had pushed down a gate that was there. So that's the way that we were able to exit. But you're right, we had no idea where we were going.
So at some point on this journey, you actually end up getting shot.
Right. So at first we heard the firing. We didn't know where it was coming from. And so anytime a new kind of volley would start, we would just hit the ground, right? We're kind of assuming it's someone in the venue. We're not sure. A new volley starts, we hit the ground. And I think maybe the third or fourth time that we went down, I kind of had this moment of realization that something was wrong. And my shoe was missing and my foot was really wet. And I just remember laying there, and it was, really interesting. It was like slow-mo. Everything, all my senses kind of left me for a moment, and I just laid there. And I remember feeling the warmth from the asphalt. And so I just had a minute to kind of think. And really what I thought was, this cannot be happening. Then I heard my girlfriend, thankfully, my friend was screaming my name. And so I, looked up at her and then was like, no, something's really wrong. And I lifted my back leg because I was laying on my stomach. So I lifted my back leg and looked, and sure enough, kind of looked like, a volcano coming out of my leg.
Oh, geez. Well, and I think that's, one of the things that probably Hollywood has conditioned us to that obviously is not accurate, right? So, I mean, most of the time you see somebody get shot in Hollywood and, oh, they're in such pain, and, oh, they lay there and they're, dead immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But it almost sounds like you didn't even realize that you'd been shot at the time, because you're, I'm sure your adrenaline's going, your heart's pumping, you've got other things on your mind than wondering what's going on. So I guess that's kind of an interesting finding, because we do see that a lot in the movies where you get shot once and you're gone, but certainly not the case for you.
No, it didn't. I didn't feel any pain for many, many minutes. Actually, it is interesting how that happened.
So and I understand that your friend really sprung into action, and this is something that I really want to make sure everybody is clear on, because we do talk a lot about first responders, and certainly being a paramedic, I've been on a lot of horrible scenes and shootings and stabbings and all that, but we can't be there right away, right? And especially in a big concert, a big music venue, stuff that's outdoors, there's just not first responders. So really, it's not the professionals, the fire, the EMS, the police. It's really the normal citizen that's the first responder, whether that's a dad, a mom, a teacher, whatever. And luckily, your friend, who I'm not sure if she had any medical training or not, but
No.
boy, she sprung into action, didn't she?
She did, yes. She was really able to kind of keep me focused on getting out of the venue, first of all. And then once we got out of the venue, there happened to be a police car on that road. It wasn't there for the shooting. It just happened to be there because that road was closed due to the concert. And so we immediately sat behind the police car. And of course, she's screaming at everyone, like, please help us, please help us. And kind of during that time, I was assessing, but not clear-headed, of course. And I just remember I was just quiet and just let things happen around me. And she was really able to get someone's attention. And a gentleman did come over, and he borrowed a belt from somebody else and applied like a makeshift tourniquet to my leg while she was applying pressure to the wound. And then, while sitting there, I was kind of able to say to myself, I think the shooter's on the roof up there, so we just have to run away. And so the one police officer was there, just kept yelling, get away, it's not safe, you have to run. And really there was only one direction for us to run, which was kind of towards the backside of the airport. And so we ran for about a mile. And of course, during that time, the belt had fallen off while we're running. And we ran, and my girlfriend was able to, find a passerby who was getting in his truck, and he turned on his headlights. So she took off running, and she said, "No, please help us. My friend's been shot. We need help." And he was thankfully very kind and let us get into the bed of his truck. And that's when I knew I needed to elevate my leg, kind of while we were running, just like you said earlier. I mean, our adrenaline was pumping, and running for almost a mile, I had left a trail of blood, and we had both acknowledged it several times. Like, we have to stop this bleeding, but at the same time, we have to get to safety. And so as soon as we kind of felt safe, I elevated, and there were some other people in the bed of the truck that had a t-shirt, and she says it, she did what she saw in Grey's Anatomy, which is she took the t-shirt and she put it over my leg, and she applied her full body weight to try to stop some of the bleeding.
Well, and thankfully it worked. Here you are
Absolutely,
today.
yes.
It did work. And I understand that you had to stay overnight in the hospital, and your husband drove out from California to come visit you in the hospital. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, thank goodness she took those steps and those actions, and in a moment of chaos had that clarity to fall back, even if it's just on a TV show, because obviously we know stopping the bleed is very important. And I know you've done some work with Stop the Bleed, of course. But very serious, and thank goodness that truck, the pickup truck, was there that was able to give you a lift so quickly too.
Absolutely, yes.
So I know we talked a little bit ago about your husband now comes out from California. You're in the hospital. They stabilize you, and now you're getting discharged, and you're looking at about a 4-hour drive back to your home. What is that? What does that look like? What kind of conversations are you having? And I should kind of note that you have a 7-year-old child at home, a 7-year-old son at this point in your life.
Mm-hmm.
What are you kind of thinking about? What are you going to tell your son about this incident and what Mom's went through and kind of all this stuff?
Mm-hmm. That was really our number one, point of and topic of conversation on the way home. Of course, he's our number one priority, and I recall even saying to the paramedics, like, "Please don't let me die. I have to be a mom." So he was always on the forefront of my mind this entire time. So, knowing I had to go home and kind of explain to him what happened, it was devastating for me, because I knew that kids, they have, they're a little bit naive, right? And they don't know all of the terrible things that happen in the world. And that's a great thing. And that's why I feel like they have so much joy, and that's why they have so much fun, is because they're just not aware of that yet. And so I didn't want to take any of that away from him. I didn't really want him to be aware that, there is this big scary world out there. So it was a huge, probably almost a 4-hour conversation of just how do we handle this with him. And we had decided really the best thing to do was just be honest with him in a very PG way. Obviously, because I was injured, and knowing that I was going to, need surgery, that we couldn't just hide it from him. So we had to just be honest, and we kind of laid down just that this is what happened, and then let him ask the questions, and we just answered them as honestly as we possibly could.
And what kind of a question would a 7-year-old ask? What kind of follow-up questions does he have? Or I struggle to even try to be in the room and think about these things, but I know that their minds have got to be racing a million miles a minute. Of course, I'm sure he's very, very happy that Mom's okay and Mom is home. But how does that processing kind of work? What are the questions that come up? What is he thinking about? What is he talking about when you lay all this out for him?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, it's been many questions in the years since the shooting. So it was definitely, I think at that time, shocking for him, and he didn't know what to say or how to react. And his main question was, you're going to be okay, and can you walk, and related around me. And then of course it went to, well, why did that happen? Why did somebody shoot? And then really one of his main questions was, is he alive still? And my husband told him, no, the shooter is not alive. And he said, good. And his response at that moment was just, I just want to go back in time and make it so this bad man didn't do this. Wow. And since then, it has been a plethora of questions, as now he's 10 and can understand more, and of course sees the news and hears stories. And so it's been a lot of questions, really good questions, which we just always try to answer very honestly.
Well, and I think, you took the right approach. I know that you also engaged with the teachers too, and talked
Mhm.
to them and used them as a little bit of a resource. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how that interaction went and why you thought it was important to reach out to the teachers that are around him?
Sure. So, you know, we felt like the people that were the closest to him needed to know. And obviously, a teacher, he spends so many hours with his teacher. And we felt like she needed to know so that she could prepare, because we knew that he would go to school now on Tuesday and have just heard this really crazy and wild thing that no kid should really ever have to hear. And he doesn't know how to deal with it. And we didn't really know how to deal with it. And we felt like we should at least just kind of give her the heads up that, hey, so literally on that 4-hour drive home, I emailed her from my phone and, just let her know, this is what happened. I'm okay. We're going to look into resources for Adrian, but just so he's going to be coming to school tomorrow. And, I was actually worried about his mental state, not just letting her know, but if he has a breakdown, or if, he starts crying, or if he is sensitive to something, this is why. And he was very sensitive. 7-year-old boys, it's all about Nerf and guns. And it took him a while, and in class he really struggled when the boys started playing around and they're playing gunfights. He wasn't comfortable with that. But yeah, we absolutely had to let the teacher know, and kind of, the other adults at the school that he was very close with. And the school was great and had some resources that they were able to pull in to talk to him. And just touch base with him and meet with him occasionally and make sure that he was doing well. And that was amazing. It was amazing to have that support from his school, as well as obviously it kind of felt like it was a community effort to make sure that he was okay and dealing with it. So it was really great.
Well, and kudos to you and your husband for thinking about it. I mean, I think a lot of folks, it was so much going on, it could easily be overlooked. And now you've got, obviously Las Vegas had so much attention because that's where the physical shooting occurred. But you can easily see how, the thousands and thousands of people there all were impacted by this event, and they all went back to their respectful communities. And, there was an impact that was felt across the nation because of this event.
Yes.
So, I think that's really great engagement with your local resources. And while the shooting didn't happen, of course, in your local community, it certainly did impact your community. So I'm really happy to hear that they had those resources and made them available, and you were able to deal with that. We also talk about limiting television coverage and kind of shielding children from that. Were you able to do that? I know it must be kind of hard, because I know you were obviously a very powerful voice after the shooting, talking about your experience in that. How did you kind of balance that between exposing your son and making sure you got the word out and the information out?
Sure. So, kind of for the first 6 months, actually, I didn't have a lot to say and a lot to do. I just kind of kept to myself. I didn't listen really to the news, to the radio, nothing. I just kind of lived in my own little world of music and podcasts. And so he didn't see the effects of that right away. And 6 months later, I had surgery. And so I think I was so focused on my physical recovery that I hadn't really started the mental aspect of it yet, and kind of seeing where I was going to go with that. And then actually kind of right after I had the surgery is when I realized, I need to find a way that I can start this emotional recovery and honestly feel comfortable leaving the house. And so that's when I got on this journey of finding Stop the Bleed and finding online trainings and other resources, how I can be more prepared so that when I do leave the house, in case I find myself in a situation similar to that, or any situation where help is needed, I would be able to help. And then honestly, so I would be able to help myself and of course my family. And so that's when we kind of, he was more introduced into that side of it. But I'm really grateful he was introduced more into the helpful side of it, and something bad has happened, but this is how we're going to deal with it. Not, this just happened and then this is the horrificness that we're dealing with. It's like he got to see all of it, on the good side.
Well, and I think that's important. We always try to find the silver lining in the cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
And try to take these horrific things that happen that you just can't even explain them, but try to find the good out of them. And I think, luckily through all that you've been doing, all the great work you've been doing, I think you made a real positive impact. So
Thank you.
yeah, well, kudos to taking a lemon and making lemonade, I guess.
Thank you.
It's a big lemon. So I guess I'm curious, and I appreciated your thoughts and comments just about kind of getting back to normal. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about, God, I mean, here we sit, almost 3 years later. What does that kind of look like? I mean, do you still what does it look like when you first go back out in public? Are you anxious? Do you have fears? I mean, what does that kind of look like when you finally do start saying, look, I got to kind of come back and live life normal as it was before? What does that process look like?
Sure.
Like this?
You know what, that's been kind of the most interesting thing out of all that, because obviously the night of October 1st was horrific. And that was absolutely like the worst night of my life. But what no one kind of prepares you for, and what you're not really, you don't really consider is the aftermath, is the recovery. And the physical recovery, it's like I was kind of delayed because I did focus so much on my physical recovery that when I started 6 months later on my emotional recovery, it was very, very difficult. And we're a young family and we love to go out and do things and be around people. And it was very difficult for me to actually go anywhere for a long time. I still struggle with it. I'm much better now, but at the beginning it's, I didn't want to really go anywhere. I didn't want to do anything just because I was scared, because I always felt like, well, if that happened, then it can happen again. And I don't know what to do. And I don't think I could survive that again. But really it was a slow process of going places I found, that were familiar to me. And kind of like you mentioned earlier, the first thing I did when I go anywhere, I still do, is where are my exits? If I need to hide, where am I hiding? If I have my son with me, what am I doing with him? Whether it's a movie theater or a restaurant. And then, when we are in a large venue, it is very difficult. We live right by Disneyland, and going to Disneyland is very hard for me. And it did take a very long time for me to kind of want to go anywhere where there was tall buildings, and then we were going to be outside, kind of anywhere that was a similar situation. I was extremely uncomfortable with. It took quite a while, but and there's still times I really struggle, and it's been a process, kind of going to concerts for the first time again and getting back to life as normal. It has been very difficult, and it has moments of breakdowns, emotional breakdowns, and I'm crying in locations where I'm not even really realizing I'm crying, but that's what I'm doing. And, there is some PTSD issues, and kind of makes it a little bit difficult, but I think ultimately we're in a much better spot.
Well, and I think that's probably the challenge, and I see this in a lot of other disasters, but I think nothing more pronounced than the shooting. And usually what happens in any disaster, everybody comes in, fundraisers, lots of money, lots of attention paid, everyone gets it, and then a week later, the news media is gone, everybody's gone, like everybody forgets about it. But, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a fire, whether it's a shooting, we know that these are lifetime long impacts that you're going to have.
Right.
And, especially when you start coming up on anniversaries and other milestones, you're right. I mean, this is a lifelong journey. You're never going to forget, obviously, what happened that day. And, some would argue that you may never get 100% over it. And that's totally okay. This is a defining moment for you as an individual, right? I mean, so I think that's just an important note when we're thinking about children, when we're thinking about parents, when we're thinking about communities that have been through such a horrific event, that, yes, your initial support is needed, but, more often than not, it's after those first couple of weeks or that first month when all the support goes away. And, America, we have a short attention span, as you know,
Yes.
right? It's really, those after effects of, 3 months later, 6 months later, then, oh my goodness, we're coming up to the 1 year anniversary. And that, of course, is going to reopen some wounds, so to speak. How have you kind of navigated that? Obviously, there's a lot of folks that were involved in this situation. Is there a survivor network that you kind of keep in touch with, or what does that process look like?
Yeah, we do. We have a couple Facebook pages, and it's been really great. It's been really nice to stay, in the community, right? We all were there. We all know what each other went through, and it's really nice to have that when you're having a bad day, or you can be there to support other people, which actually makes you feel really good too. But yeah, it's great to have that community, and I'm lucky because I'm from Southern California, and that's where a lot of the people that were in attendance of the concert are from. So, like, we have the Los Angeles Angels, which are close to us, and they have like a Route 91 day, and they honor the 58 lives that were lost that night, and other organizations, like local restaurants and bars, that will kind of allow us to gather and meet and again honor those lives. And because we are so close to Vegas, we do go back for the anniversaries and pay a visit out there. There's a healing garden to honor those lives, and yeah, we just go out and visit there as much as possible, and chat with, we call them our people. They're our family now. And yeah, truly, they're really the only ones that know what we went through, and it's nice to have them to kind of communicate with, and sometimes humble, right? Because you get a little lost, and it's nice to have them to bring you back to the solid ground.
Well, that's so great. And I haven't seen it in person, but it's on my list to see the beautiful memorial garden with all the trees they planted and all that. So really looking forward to getting out to Vegas and visiting that. Just the pictures online, they look very moving, and I can only imagine what it must be like in person. But
yeah, it's very beautiful.
so I wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of preparedness and thinking about planning ahead of time and planning in advance, and how, obviously this event has changed you and probably changed a lot of your perceptions on different things. But I was curious if you had any tips or any strategies on, how members of the general public could be a little bit better prepared for these type of events.
Mm-hmm. I would say, that's the thing I've said from the beginning is like, how did this happen to me? I'm just like a baseball mom. I never thought in a million years that I would find myself in a situation where I was being shot at, right? I think most of us are on the right side of the law, and we choose not to live that life. And so that is not ever where I thought I was going to find myself. That being said, we get stuck in that mindset that will never happen to me, and that's just not the case anymore. And so we have to be prepared, and there's resources, and with your communities online, there's just people out there such as yourself that are offering great programs for individuals or schools or corporations, that will help you prepare for really any scenario. And I just think it is so important. That's really all we can do. And as you mentioned earlier, we are just groups of people that turn into first responders or bystanders. We turned into first responders because there's no other choice, because it does take time for medical personnel to arrive, no matter what the situation, a car accident, a shooting, or anything else for that matter. And we just, you can prepare yourself for those, and you should absolutely find the resources that are available to you.
So we get asked this question a lot, and I'm picking on your brain as a mother and as someone that's lived through this. A lot of times we'll get childcare providers or teachers that are looking for some encouragement or even some strategies on how to keep calm during an event like this, because we know that the kids are going to be looking up to the adults in the room to gauge their reaction and take their cues from. I understand, being in some of these horrific situations, on a professional level, that time kind of stands still and everything becomes a blur and your heart's racing and adrenaline and all that. What would you say to those, childcare providers or teachers? Are there any good strategies, any good thoughts you could give them about how to kind of stay calm, get the job done, get the kids out to safety in a meaningful way?
Mm-hmm. I can't relate to being a teacher, of course, and having that many kids under my care, but I know for me, taking those classes and knowing what to do was extremely helpful. After, the shooting, I had taken some Stop the Bleed courses, and I actually came upon a woman one day who had hit her head and was laying on the cement and bleeding out. And, I pulled my car over and I get out, and I'm already, my heart is pumping, my adrenaline is going, I'm shaking, and I get out of my car and I run to her, and I'm trying to talk to her. She's not really responsive. There's blood everywhere. And I'm like, freaking out, right? I got to call 911, but I'm like, wait, wait a second, you know what to do. Like, take a second, breathe. You know what to do. You took the courses, you've practiced, you know what to do. Go get your kit and go help her. Dial 911 when you get over there, but you know what to do. And since then, kind of getting that little situation has shown me that if you are trained and you can take the time, right? Remind yourself of that training, retake trainings, put yourself in that scenario. I'm not saying put yourself in that scenario to freak yourself out, but if you've had training, maybe once a month, maybe once a week, you sit and you say, okay, if something were to happen today, this is what I'm doing. And just remind yourself that you know what to do. You know how to stay calm, you need to breathe, and just plan for it. And I know that for some people, they say, well, we don't want to plan for it because A, maybe it'll happen to us, or B, that's just being too paranoid. But there's a term that I heard recently, it's preparanoid. And I feel like that's where I fall, which let's just be prepared because we don't know what's going to happen. And so I know for me, knowing what to do I was able to keep calm. So I would just say, take the courses that are available to you, take them multiple times, and go over the notes you took, or go over the material that was provided to you, and just keep reminding yourself of what to do. And I think that will help a lot of people stay calm.
Well, that's certainly great advice. And I know one of the things that we always struggle with is that people really want definitive plans. If this happens, what do I do? And in a way, we have to explain that every situation is so different. We can't give you a plan. We can give you, here's a bunch of options. And if this incident ever does happen, you're going to have to just quickly in your mind, what are the options? What is the best case scenario that I can do right now? And I think, a lot about your story when you're getting shot, you don't know where the shots are coming from. People are trying to leave, but that self-preservation kicks in. And immediately, even in the middle of this horrific scene, you're saying, I know there's porta potties. I know that provides some shield. There's a police car. I know I can get over there. There's an airport. There's a fence. I'm kind of wondering if you can just talk through kind of that self-preservation, that self-survival, that clarity of mind that comes to you kind of in the middle of this emergency where you do understand what you have to do and have to get the job done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that, in those moments, I, again, recall saying, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. And I think that's a normal response. But I think, sometimes being able to take a second and assess really what's going on, just a second or two. You don't need to take a minute, right? You don't have a minute, but a second or two to say, this is what's happening. What do I need to do now? And for us, I think that moment of me realizing, I believe the shots are coming from the roof. And I mean, when I was able to get to safety, I called my husband in the bed of that truck and said, like, we're being shot and the guy's on the roof of Mandalay Bay. And so, just taking those few seconds to like calm, don't talk to anyone, and just really be within myself and say, what are we doing? What's happening? This is where I think it's coming from. So we have to run this in this direction to run away from the threat. And so I think that's, really a huge piece of advice I have is just take a moment, calm, breathe, and think, what is happening? What is my best option? And that's really the only thing I can say, because at that point I didn't have any training and I didn't know what to do.
Well, we're so happy that it all worked out okay. And
Me too.
I mean, it's horrific. And I'm with from the bottom of my heart, I'm so sorry you had to live through something so horrible. And gosh, I wish we could figure out a way just to stop all this stuff altogether so we never have to think about it. But sadly, we know that that's probably not going to happen anytime soon, and there sadly are going to be more of these horrific incidents. So I think it's probably incumbent on everybody to try to be as best prepared as we can, to learn the skills, to think about options, to have a plan. And it's the plan's probably not going to be 100% because there's so many factors you can't control. But the more things that you can think about, whether it's even just watching a TV show in Grey's Anatomy and triggering back to, in Grey's Anatomy, they used the shirt and they stopped the bleeding,
Yeah.
It's those kind of things that your brain will trigger in the middle of these situations that can make the difference between life and death. And
Absolutely. Yes.
So I would say you're probably a big advocate for training as far as that goes.
Absolutely. Yes. Everybody get trained. Get trained. I know me. I'm like, let me train in everything I possibly can. Whatever I have the time and the funds to do, I will be getting trained in. Again, not trying to be paranoid, but just because I just feel like if I'm near someone, whether that be my son or a stranger, I want to be able to help. And, I do know when after you go through something like this and you walk away and you're fine, kind of dealing with, the people that weren't able to walk away or the people that were more injured than you, it makes it's a thing. And I know some people call it like a survivor's guilt, and it's very difficult to live with because you always wish you could have done more. And so I now know that if I'm ever in a similar situation, I know I will be able to do everything in my power to help somebody else. And in a way, like that gives me my power back, which is really important.
Thinking about the experience you've been through and, obviously your son, have you had discussions with your, the teachers of the school district with others and kind of tried to instill on them the importance of having the training for the teaching staff?
Yes. It's interesting, absolutely. Kind of once I was able to come to terms with everything that had happened, I said, well, now everyone needs to be trained in everything. But specifically, I kind of went the stop the bleed route, just because since that's how my life was saved. And so, went to the school and said, we'd like to do this. And it turns out our district was already in the process of creating a stop the bleed training for our teachers, which is fantastic. But I want to take it a step further, and I wanted that from day one and do like an active shooter training. It is difficult. My son, at the time he was 7, so he's in elementary school, and our district kind of said, no way, that's way too young. In elementary school, they don't need that training yet. But what about junior high and what about high school? So that's still something that is in talks, is in the works. It's amazing to me that it is sometimes met with some resistance because these are our kids. And I know here, in California, we had the Saugus shooting not too long ago. And there was the band teacher, a very young lady, and she was able to save a life with the training that she had received. And so I am, I'm just pushing for it. And I feel so fortunate to find connections such as yourself and meet people like you who are out there trying to make our schools safer, because we have to get this training and all trainings into schools, and just prepare our teachers because, really when they're with them at school, we can't be there to protect them. They are their protectors. And whether maybe that's not their exact job, but since they are there, we know teachers, they're saints. They're teachers for a reason. And so we as parents and communities have to give them those resources and support them in saying like, we're behind you and we're going to back you up and make sure that you feel like you're prepared if something does happen.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, we do a lot of training of childcare providers, and we're talking, gosh, a newborn all the way up to, 5, 6, 7 years old before we even get into the school. And sadly, we need to make sure they're prepared too. And we're doing this in a way, of course, that's responsible. We don't want to scare the kids. Again, much like you said earlier, that childhood is such a precious time in someone's life. We don't want to pierce that veil. We want kids to be able to be kids and be safe. And that's why when we train, we talk about, bees do a beehive and these kind of hide and seek and these other games. We never ever want to, scare the kids because that's obviously counterproductive.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate how generous you are with your time and sharing your story. It's just something I hope that, I wish you didn't have to go through, but I'm so thankful that you're alive and you're able to spread this and have just done such marvelous work, getting the word out. I guess if there was one thing that you thought was really important for everyone to know, what would that one thing be?
Just to kind of go along with your business model is just be prepared because you never know what's going to happen. So be prepared.
Well, Lacey, thank you so much for joining us. This is so fantastic. I know everybody will keep you in their thoughts and in their prayers, and just thank you for all you're doing. Again, sorry you had to live through this, but we really appreciate you taking some time to share your insights and share your story with us today.
Thank you so much.